the leader, his wife, and his son came over to my parents' small little home on the compound and brutally beat them basically to a pulp. My mom's face was just bloodied and bruised. And I walked into our home. Again, I used the home. We had our own homes, but we were subjected to anyone coming in at any moment. There was not much privacy, and they had ripped things off the wall. It looked like a crime scene. And I walked in to that home and I looked at my parents who were bloodied and beaten. And I looked at all of our personal belongings strewn over. Obviously, someone had come in a full rage and just ripped not only my parents, but our home apart. And it was at that moment I said, I don't care if I'm going to hell. This is hell. And I'm getting myself out and I'm getting my parents and anyone else that I can take with me.
Welcome to Beyond the Matrix with your host, Adric Suber. Have you ever wondered if this is all there is in life? What lies beyond what we were made to believe? In this podcast, we're going to uncover real human stories of those who have taken courage to go off the beaten path and live in full authenticity. We're going to challenge what you believe is possible, fuel your spirit with courage, and heart with warmth to fully live your truth. So buckle up and get ready for the ride beyond the Matrix. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Matrix. Today I am joined by a very special guest, and you are in for a ride. She's going to walk us through a very special journey to the world of the unknown by many people, and she has escaped an abusive and extreme religious cult by the age of 25 and has worked her way through to assimilate herself again into the society, traveling around the world, living in New York City, and making her way back to Bali. And she has, trust me, worked her way to get to where she is today, to disintegrate the belief system that was so ingrained in her body, in her system, the brainwashing that she had experienced. And if you didn't know her, you wouldn't have known that she had gone through all that, because she's such a beautiful friend with a beautiful heart and soul, with a childlike curiosity and the authenticity that always allows me to shine in my truth as well. So without further ado, I'd love to welcome my dearest friend that I dearly adore and love in Bali, Jessica Kahn.
Thank you. Thank you, Edric. This is such a beautiful honor to sit down and get to know one another on an even deeper level. So I was so excited and honored, not only to be a guest, but also to support you in this beautiful vision that you have for all of us. So
Thank you.
yes,
Thank you
it
for
goes both
being here.
ways. Yes.
Yeah, so you go by the name Jaja.
That's one of my nicknames. Yes. We can do Jaja as well.
Yeah, Jaja. You're actually,
I like Jaja.
and you're currently writing a book.
Correct. Yes. I am almost complete with the book. And it's the first time I never actually thought I was going to write a book. And to finish that one sentence, it's the first time I've sort of come forward to tell my story completely. I've never really told my full story. And for many, many years, the people I met along my journey, once I got out of the cult, had no idea of who I was or what had happened in my past. So the book is the first time that I'm sitting down and putting pen to paper,
Wow.
and I'm really facing my truth, I'm speaking my truth, and I'm sharing it. So it's a very personal
Yeah.
story. But it's really been beautiful as well. So we can get into that
Yeah.
later. But
Yeah.
yes. So it's
And
almost complete.
yeah. And why now, after so many years of like healing and processing all of these things, why do you feel like now is the right time to tell your story?
So it's a combination of being intuitively guided to do so. So it's listening to a voice, the same voice that intuitively guided me out of the abusive cult is also guiding me to write this book. I've also, in the last 4 to 5 years, done really deep work on facing my past. For many, many years, I did not face it. I put it in a box and pretended it never happened and just started over. And as we all know on these journeys, we can't really get away forever if we want to continue to move forward, not addressing pains and traumas.
Yeah.
So it's only in the last 4 or 5 years that I've done so. And I believe it's the ending of my healing process to now be able to speak it, and share the journey, because it's not a sad story. The story I'm
Yeah.
sharing is one of resilience and great wisdom that I've
Yeah.
gotten as a result. So
Yeah. Well, thank you
thank
for
you.
stepping
Yeah.
forward and taking the courage to share a story that I think most of us will never have heard of.
Yes.
And I'm sure through the pain and through the struggle and the shadows, there's great light and
Yeah,
wisdom
there
that
is.
comes out of
Yeah,
this. I'm sure, like looking back, you could tell this, but while going through the process,
right.
it was very difficult.
Thank you. Thank you for that recognition. It was. And I've struggled a lot. It's really, truly in the last 3 to 4 years that I've sort of, what's the word, exploded and kind of come into
Mm,
myself and been in a place of peace. I
yeah,
was very, very unhappy and very in a lot of pain for many, many years. So,
yeah.
yeah.
And I just wanted to kind of applaud you for the person that showing up as today,
Thank
because
you.
just knowing what you've gone through and seeing who you are today,
Yes.
I could hardly tell that you went through such a dark past, because
Yes.
you just come across as very strong, like beautiful and independent woman, and this smile. I mean, you're constantly lighting people around you, and you're so kind. And
Mm,
I think for someone who has been hurt before,
mm,
to not perpetuate that hurt onto others and for you, because there's just so much kindness. Every time I'm around you, I feel like, oh,
mm,
I feel so seen and safe to really be who I am. And there's such a gift. And for you to transcend that pain and
mm.
to spread love
Yes.
instead, that was just beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really such a beautiful compliment. And I always feel like you see me as well. And it's so nice to be seen and not
Mm,
have to be seen, not have to be the mask that we so often, but to have
mm,
someone really say, it's safe, you can show yourself, and you do
yeah.
the same thing for me. So
Uh,
I was very excited to say, like, yes, I can, yes.
well, let's get into your story.
Okay.
So you were born in a religious cult.
Correct. Yes.
Tell us more.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I will for the sake, because cults are a little more common in the United States. It's a little bit more of a strange.
Mm,
So I don't know in case someone's not familiar with a cult. It's basically you generally it's a group of people living together following a leader of some sort. And oftentimes in the United States, I think partly because we are protected under freedom of religion there. So
mm,
the government and they can't really interfere as long as there's nothing visually abusive going on. Or so a lot of times these cults form very often in the United States where someone will have a religious idea or it could just be a spiritual community where individuals come together, they live in a concentrated environment, and over time, they become brainwashed, and this leader or several leaders control their minds, and
mm.
they kind of lose their ability to discern or make choices for themselves. So
Yeah.
ours was a religious community. It was, do you want me to go back and give a little history on it?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So our leader was one of the founding fathers of AA. So for anyone who knows AA, Alcoholics Anonymous,
yeah.
they have the big book, which is kind of the book of principles that they live by to maintain their sobriety. And
Mm,
Bill Wilson is considered the founder. But although he's the founder, he got together with a group of recovering addicts in the early 1960s, and they all wrote the book together.
mm,
So our leader was one of those original recovering alcoholics who helped write the big book.
right.
And he had this beautiful idea where he lived in New York City. He went a couple hours out of the city in this gorgeous rural area where there's not much happening, where you can be very isolated from society. And initially, I believe that his intention was to truly create an environment to not only support his own recovery, but to make it available to others
Yeah.
seeking. But over time, this community, this beautiful concept turned into a very controlling environment.
Mm,
Um, a lot of people came to receive recovery from alcohol and drugs. So you're dealing with people whose recovery is a little bit contingent on this man. So
mm,
you could see how there could become like a subservience a little bit, and
mm,
he's saved their life, so to speak. So there
mm,
was a dynamic of that going on as well. For me now, writing about it, observing in my own life, I recognize that at some point he stopped living and being the word that he spoke. And I think
mm.
that's where it goes down dark paths. And
Right.
once we give ourselves over to a lack of integrity in our truth, then it gives all sorts of things can happen.
Yeah.
And it went downhill very fast. He was a raging alcoholic, so he started drinking again.
Wow.
Yeah,
Founding member
yeah.
of AA started drinking again.
Yes. But this time, because just to give a little bit of context back, the religion was Christian,
Yeah.
but it was based heavily on the doctrine of Catholicism. So we believed in Holy Mass, in the receiving the body and blood of Christ in the form of wine, which is what's common in the Catholic Church. So he was basically so enlightened.
Mm,
So I'm now speaking from the mindset of our brainwashed cult selves. He was so enlightened that he was just taking mass all the time to connect with God. But what he was
Mm.
actually doing is drinking himself into pure oblivion
Wow.
and then coming out into the congregation of his cult in drunken fits. And that's where a lot of the physical abuse that took place there, because he was a raging alcoholic
Yeah.
who stopped practicing, did not keep himself in integrity, and now was drinking under the disguise of connecting with God through the Holy Eucharist.
Mm.
I
Wow.
hope that makes sense. It's very
Yeah.
complicated.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So everyone believed that when he came down in those drunken fits, that he was enlightened by God, which is frightening.
Wow. So
Yeah.
everyone knew that he was drunk all the time and kind of was okay with how he was acting. The
We were in denial. I did
right.
not know because I grew up there. So I didn't have a lot of context of what drunk versus spiritually enlightened, the difference, because I grew up fairly isolated in this cult outside of society.
Yeah.
So I had never seen anyone drink alcohol. So I had
Right.
no idea that his behavior, once I left and I actually remember I was in New York City and I was walking by a homeless man who was bleary eyed and red eyed and drunk on the side of the street. And he looked at me and he screamed. And all of a sudden, my whole body went into panic. And I thought, oh my God, our leader. This is the face of our leader. Those bloodshot eyes are the eyes I saw.
Wow.
So for the adults who did have a context,
Mm.
they believed they knew they did not think he was drinking alcohol. I mean, they did not think he was a raging alcoholic. They knew he was doing the Eucharist, but they had deceived themselves or convinced themselves that he did it in a spiritual way. It was just a little bit. And that when he came down in these fits, it wasn't alcohol, it was God's
Wow.
message.
Wow.
It's so bizarre.
It's so bizarre. It goes to show like how when you're so isolated from
Yes.
what's going on outside of your bubble, like you
Yes.
have no reference
Yes.
to like what is right and wrong because this is the only truth that you've
Right.
witnessed
Yes.
and you've experienced.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so you were born in
It
this
was,
cult.
yes, my mother actually gave birth to me at home.
Okay.
So she delivered me in the home. So I like to say, like, I literally was indoctrinated from birth. I didn't even have
Wow.
2 days in the hospital. My
Yeah.
influence was purely there in the cult, surrounded by cult members
Wow.
on our little hill, isolated from society.
Walk us through a little bit more about what was life like in the
Mm,
cult.
yeah.
What do you guys do every day? What was the rituals and ceremonies like?
Yes. Okay. So it changed a lot at whim. It was very erratic environment.
Yeah.
Our leader would come up with random ideas. And so there was a combination of monotonous, just like the same thing over and over again, and then random. He changed like he controlled what we wore, what time. He would decide everyone needed to be in bed at a certain time, everyone needed to get up at a certain time.
Wow.
People's sex lives were very controlled between
Really?
couples. But then there was a lot of other things going on behind closed doors. But there was this extreme repression and like sexual abstinence
Huh.
as the front, but then behind that there was all sorts of twisted things happening that no one was fully always aware of. But
Right.
so he controlled that, but it was based on daily mass, the Catholicism. So we would he would tell us what time to go to bed and what time to get up. We had a chapel on the compound, so
Mm.
sometimes we would have to get up early and go to church mass every day, sometimes twice a day. But we were also supposed to do our own like meditation every morning, or they called it prayer time. So you had to get up 4:35. You had to do at least an hour of prayer time.
Wow.
Then oftentimes you had to go then to the church. Sometimes, again, it changed a lot. Sometimes we had some communal homes
Yeah.
as well as individual homes. Everything was very close together.
Mm.
So sometimes we would have to gather in the community halls for different meetings or services or worship, but that
Mm.
changed. So sometimes you were required to we had to work as children. We were always working. We had farms. He was always coming up with different business ideas of how to sustain the cult.
Yeah.
And all children and cult members, everyone was working, working, working. There
Wow.
was not a lot of play as a child. We had a registered school on the property. So it was very much more like being homeschooled, but it was
Mm.
registered with the state.
Mm.
So as long as we took the state tests when we were in high school and we passed, then we were able to get a diploma. So sometimes as children, sometimes we wouldn't have school at all because he thought the world was ending and we didn't need it. And other times we would have some kind of schedule for schooling, which was more of a homeschooling
Yeah.
situation. But the one constant was we got together every Saturday night and we had something called the Sing. And I actually write about this in my book because it's anybody who's come in touch with the cult knows we're kind of, it was our weekly gathering and
Yeah.
where we sang songs and a lot of controlled entertainment took place.
Huh.
And he also filmed everything. So it's very strange. So
Yeah.
even in our communal gatherings, he assigned people to be on the camera at all times, and there were monitors all around. So
Wow.
he was observing and watching people all the time. So you actually never knew if you were being watched or so
Wow.
forth. So it was a very, very weird environment.
I want to understand a bit more about what you think his motive was to be so controlling and establishing all this like rituals.
Definitely power and control for sure. And I
Yeah.
think they say absolute power controls absolutely, or is it absolute? There's some, now I'm missing it, but there's a power in power.
Yeah.
And so I also believe in terms of like the sex and also the breakdown within families, in order to have absolute control all over each one of us, you had to break that bond and
Mm,
intimacy and connection through couples, through family, that keeps a bond that's a stronger unit than one individual.
mm,
And so they also, we were all kind of supposed to report on one another, including family members on family members. So there was an environment of, you never know who
mm,
was going to decide that you were in sin, and sin was just made up. And then you would get in trouble. And everyone was trying to maintain their ranking within the system because we had a hierarchy.
mm,
And so you wanted, if you didn't bring in enough people, or you didn't bring your husband or your wife or your child in and say they're bad, they need to be disciplined, then you would be disciplined for protecting. So
huh,
I think sex also, the strict rules around sex was a way to break down any kind of unity
mm,
between intimacy so that
right.
people really were on their own. And then when you're on your own, you're so
Yes.
much easier to control. You
Yes.
don't have that bond. So I believe there's an element of that at play. One thing to I think is important to kind of help people understand, you would say, why, how are these adults who entered here
Yeah.
allowing, this sounds bizarre. So the context of it all was that we were a Christian cult, that we were chosen by God, that the world was ending. I don't know, you hear these stories. That we were chosen by God to save the world. So the entire outside world was evil, of the devil. If we were to step out of this closed, safe environment, we too would become possessed.
Mm,
So there was a fear of that. And then on top of it, the violent discipline that turned sometimes into beating, that all sorts of different physical abuse was under the guise that we had the devil in us. So we were all doing this, and family was reporting on family, thinking in the twisted brainwashing mentality
mm,
that this was their rigorous work towards becoming pure so that they could
right.
serve this incredibly high
Wow.
calling to be the ones that saved the world at the end. So it's very, very twisted and it's hard to explain. When I explain it now, having been out for so many years, I'm like, how
Yeah.
did this once be my belief system? I don't even
Yeah.
understand it. But
Yeah.
we did, we believed that.
Yeah. Because once you're so deep in it,
Yes,
especially when you didn't know what else is out
yeah,
there,
yes,
this was your entire belief system.
yes, yeah,
When you yeah, can't see what lies ahead of you.
right.
So what is your reality is what
Yes,
currently exists in your present reality. And
yeah,
that's why we just don't know what we don't know when
yes,
we don't know what is outside of the wall or outside of the matrix.
right.
We
Yes,
the matrix is our reality. We just don't know what's any better.
yes, yes.
So actually before I jump to like how do you start developing this awareness,
Okay, yeah,
I want to dig a little bit deeper into, you mentioned some people will be disciplined,
yes.
and there's this communal gatherings. What was it like?
So it often meant our leader would just call someone out of the crowd. So we would get together in the communal for the sings, for instance. And we were supposed to, another thing, we were always supposed to be very happy. Like you, if you, the leader came around, you had to have a smile, you had to have constant, this exuberant
Wow.
joy. So he would scan as we're singing a hymn. We get together in the room. His son played the guitar and kind of led us in Christian songs and all these strange songs that, because we had no television, no radio, no real access to the outside world. And so our songs were like these Christian songs that we pulled that we sang together in worship, so to speak. So he would sit in the back and watch the camera as the camera people would, and he would just all of a sudden You sometimes he'd just jump up. You had no idea. He'd start screaming. He swore a lot. I don't know if I can swear in here or not.
Yeah, go ahead.
Like, motherfucker, you
Yeah.
pussy, like just shrieking all
Wow.
these terrible words. And everyone in the crowd, people would look up at the monitors. No one knew who it was. But when he was in that rage, he'd point someone out. Sometimes other members, he'd have them hit that person up, or he'd just come at them. There was a lot of physical smacking and beating.
Wow.
We'd watch as like he did more of the abuse to the adults
Mm,
at the hands of the leader, and then we as children were abused by other members in our school environment. There was a woman there that was she handpicked children that she didn't like, and I
mm,
was one of them. And she would so her it would it'd be under the guise of getting punished. And in
mm.
those scenarios specifically, it happened to me, not all the children, because she had specials, but special children that she liked and some she didn't. And she didn't like me, so she would strip us naked and bring all the kids around, and we would be beaten.
Wow, she would
So
strip you naked and
yeah,
then gather all the children to watch
yeah,
you being
to
bitten.
being beaten, yeah. So as you can imagine, I had one, I write about this particular event in my book as well, but it was a day that I think, well, it was the day that I really lost all of my self-worth and
How
love.
old were you when that
I was
happened?
about 4 or 5. Yeah.
Wow.
But she disciplined children even younger, and like children were not allowed to cry, even babies. So if
Mm,
a child 6, 7 months old would be disciplined for crying when it's their only way to communicate what they need. So by the time we were 2 or 3, we were being hit. They would take the ruler. So they would sit and then they'd beat us or smack us with the ruler. But they were very big on corporate punishment and stripping us naked
mm.
to give the punishment. So yeah, so that particular case, and as a small child, you're already so sensitive to your body and your private area, and
Yeah.
so I remember, and I was bullied a lot as well. We had a hierarchy, and our family was very low down because my father had an illness. And so I already was told I was ugly and weird and stupid all the time.
Mm.
And she supported the children that bullied me.
Wow.
She kind of empowered them to be mean as well and would go along with it. So I
Yeah.
was deeply humiliated and deeply felt like no one liked me.
Yeah.
So this act was just the end. I remember she brought everyone around, and I remember when she took my underwear off and I was stripped naked, and all these children that ridiculed me were watching me and watching her beat me. I just remember thinking, I'm going to go inside of myself and I'm never coming out. Like this outside world is not something that I can ever look in the face again. And so I
Yeah.
retreated deep, deep, deep within me.
Uh,
And I think now I understand the piece of me detached. And
yeah.
that's been my journey, is bringing that little child back inside of me.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah,
first of all, I'm so sorry that
that's
you
okay.
went through
Yeah,
that. Like, nobody deserves to be treated that way, let alone
yeah,
a 4-year-old girl
right, right.
to be humiliated and in the and being witnessed by a conscious adult and
Yeah,
allowing for that to happen
yes,
and empowering the kids to do that to you.
yes.
That's
She was very, very high up. She was one of, because we had a hierarchy. We had the leader, his son and his wife, and then they called them stewards.
mm,
So different people at different levels of authority within the cult. And the more authority you had, the more random acts you could just tell someone they were in sin and discipline them. So she and her husband were literally second in command there. And she had 4 children, and her children were bullies. And so they ran the pack of bullies. And with her, I mean, it's not that she said go out and be mean, but she
yeah,
was in our homeschool environment,
yeah.
and she would defend them and allow them and laugh with them, and also pick out
Wow.
the children they didn't like, and then continue to brutalize us. And yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Oh, I
Mhm.
just can't comprehend how like an adult could like with a just not have any conscience to just to show compassion to a
Right.
4-year-old
Especially a
girl.
mother, right, who has
Yeah, and she's a
children.
mother.
I've done a lot of deep healing specifically with this woman at there, because she was a bit of she was I was terrorized by her and the acts that she did on me. But a lot of these people were broken.
Mm.
They had come either through addiction or were not able to continue on in life because they themselves had experienced trauma. And from a place of compassion, I don't justify her behavior, but as an
Yeah.
adult looking back, when she was 18 years old, she walked into the bathroom and found her father. dead in the bathtub who had committed suicide by slitting his wrists.
Oh wow.
So there was great rage and trauma inside of her. Not that she has any reason to inflict it on a child, but there was obviously a wound that had not
Yeah.
been healed, and she
Yeah.
was out to hurt. And I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah. Yeah. It's beautiful
yeah,
that for what she's done to you and for you to be able to step back and see what
yeah,
was going on
yes,
in her life to be stepping in such an evil role to do that hurt to you
yeah,
that was beautiful.
yes. Thank you.
And the saying was like hurt people hurt other people.
Yes, exactly. And I have more compassion because I have not inflicted what she's inflicting on me. But I see sometimes as I work on myself and I observe my behavior, I can see little things that I do sometimes when I'm not in the right state or when I'm hurting. I
Mm,
can be more hurtful to others. So I have compassion. I'm a human as well, and she was human. And, I understand how we work. And when we're
mm,
hurting, we're hurting. We're in anger, we're in rage, we're
yeah.
in pain, and we're not connected to our
Yeah.
true self and source and energy and love. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
So obviously there was such a painful memory and experience to go through it as a child.
yes.
Um, were there any other significant moments that happened
Um,
in the cult?
what there was an event fast forwarding to that allowed me the day that I decided that I was going to get out of the cult was with I don't like to tell anyone else's stories. I'm also very careful about only speaking about what happened to me. And so I
Mm,
don't want to put any of my family members,
yeah.
but my sister has her own story of things that occurred to her there. And as a result, to injustice that happened to my sister. The leader, his wife, and his son came over to my parents' small little home on the compound and brutally beat them, basically to a pulp. My mom's face was just bloodied and bruised. And I walked into our home. Again, I used the home. We had our own homes, but we were subjected to anyone coming in at any moment. There was not much privacy, and they had ripped things off the wall. It looked like a crime scene. And I walked in to that home and I looked at my parents who were bloodied and beaten. And I looked at all of our personal belongings strewn over. Obviously, someone had come in a full rage and just ripped not only my parents, but our home apart.
Mm,
And it was at that moment I said, I don't care if I'm going to hell. This is hell. And I'm getting myself out and I'm getting my parents and anyone else that I can take with me. So that was
mm,
also although there were beatings and people would get punished and smacked, not to that brutality, not to
yeah.
what I walked into. So that was another very significant moment in the physical abuse at
Yeah.
that place that I said no more. That
Wow.
broke me.
Now I'm very curious. Obviously, that was the final event that triggered you
Yes.
to finally escape the cult. But as someone who was born into this group, and that was your reality left and right and center, how do you finally start developing this awareness?
So, Edric, it's so interesting because it's part of I believe that we are born with a knowing
Mm,
because when you look at my situation, I knew. I don't know how to say there was something in me
mm,
that despite the fact that I was isolated from society, I had very little comparison. I had very little to compare my life with.
yeah.
I should have known no better. To me, that should have been truth 100%.
Yeah.
There was something, there's a barometer within me of
Mm,
truth that I believe I was born with, that I believe we are all born with.
mm,
And that's why my story, I think, is so beautiful, is that I'm living proof that despite our external environment, which is
yes.
important, we have something deeper within us. And whether we're
Mm,
aware of it or whether over time we learn to discover it,
yeah.
I don't know. So to answer your question, it was very active as a child. I came in with a very active knowing. I was, even before I started to retaliate from the cult, I always questioned things. They would tell me things, but they didn't resonate with me. And so,
Mm,
and I give my mom a lot of credit because although she was brainwashed and she was there, my mother questioned a lot. And I saw her get in a lot of trouble because she wasn't submissive and subservient. She was there because she believed it to be true. So when they forced things on her that weren't, she would fight back. She would question. So she would get in trouble a lot, but she also instilled something in me. And
mm,
she taught me through that like, don't just do what you're told, like, do it because you believe it. So I always knew certain things to be true. And then as I got older, I just, the watching children getting smacked and beaten and watching my parents, it did something in me didn't
Wow.
align with it.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, I also was heavily indoctrinated in this Christian hell, devil, heaven.
Yeah.
So it was very, very confusing. It was the
Yeah.
dualities going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, you're like a living proof that
Yes.
there's a higher intelligence
Yeah.
that we could tap into beyond the information that is being fed
Yes.
into our brains.
Yeah.
You know, like comparing with the adults in the group, for example,
Yes.
whom, like you said, they have before entering the cult, they have reference points of like
Yes.
what's going on outside. But for
Yes.
you, this was the only reality,
Yep.
and for you to still question all the things that you were seeing and to step outside of being able to zoom out and see this is not right.
Yes.
There's a dissonance
Yeah.
between what you're seeing and what you feel is right from your heart and from your gut.
Yes. Yes.
That was profound.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
And eventually, I guess what started from like the hunch that there's something wrong going on here to like it grows into like I guess a desire to want to get out of this place and filled with like I guess rage and anger and
Yes. And fear.
and fear.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like you said, it's a very confusing for
Yeah.
you.
Yes. I always knew there was something out beyond
Yeah.
this. And I remember we lived in these rolling hills and we had our big communal house and had this big glass window and you could just see these rolling hill after hill. And I remember as a small child looking out there being like, there's more out there. I know it. Like I had
Um,
this like desire for
yeah.
more.
Yeah, and you guys weren't allowed to step outside of this like compound.
For the most part, not. So in the very early stages, we were able to go visit my grandparents once a year, and my grandparents could come up, but over time, it became more and more regulated to the point, no.
Yeah.
We would go out into the outside world, so to speak, to run errands, like to go to
Mm,
a store to get paper towels or things like
right.
that. But again, our lock was we were so indoctrinated in the belief that
Yeah.
we weren't tied up, but we believed we'd go out to do our whatever it was to run that errand and come back to the compound.
Right. What was the story that you were told when you saw people outside of your community?
Well, I just believed that they were, they were either of the devil or they weren't evolved enough. So there was
Right.
this sense of superiority,
Mm, right.
that whole, we're God's chosen. So
Yeah.
I was fascinated by them. I was secretly jealous.
Mm,
I really wanted to be like them. They had pretty makeup and hair
yeah.
and clothes, and I wasn't allowed any of that. Oftentimes we had a dress code, so I had to
Um,
so I was secretly jealous.
yeah.
Definitely. I used to wish that I was out there.
Right.
Um, and it was kind of a joke because again, it was a very rural community. So even going out, it was 45 minutes to
Mm,
the nearest store.
right.
So you're dealing with a smaller mentality of people, a rural
Yeah.
community, people that aren't the most sophisticated or intelligent person. I guess you can't say they're not intelligent, but not the most sophisticated people.
Yeah.
So we were sort of known in the neighborhood as the weirdos on the hill.
Right.
And when we did descend into society, we were like,
Like,
it's
this time.
literally
Yeah.
like down the hill. And we were strange. I mean, we saw a TV like in
Yeah.
like a department store going with like an ad, and we would just be like staring at the TV
Yeah.
and we stared at people. Like people laugh at me now. Sometimes I still stare at people. But it's because I can't see them now. Because
Yeah, 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 yeah.
but yeah, we were mesmerized. Whenever
Yeah.
we had contact to the outside world, I was
Yeah, because I was just curious. It's like you said, you had contact with the outside
yeah,
world, but for you to still believe that it's not right to like be curious,
yeah,
to like to even see what else is out there and to kind of imitate what they were doing and
yes,
to still believe that oh your little kind of community was like the chosen one.
yeah,
That was wow, that was like heavy, intense indoctrination.
very much so.
Yeah,
Very, very much so.
yeah.
And it's yeah. I was mentioning I was having a conversation with someone else and they would like punish you, smack you, beat you, whatever. And then afterwards they give you all this love, you're the best. So it was this constantly this
Wow.
abuse and then love.
Yeah.
You're bad, you're special. You're bad, you're special. They would like woven deeply ingrained in the system of our beliefs were real truths that resonate with me today, this moment. So it became very confusing He's like, that's not right, but this is right. Oh, but they're telling me to do this right thing, but they're doing that. That must be part of the right thing they're telling me because I know it to be right for myself. So there was a lot of good and bad, even though I don't believe in good and bad in such a way, but for the sake of comprehension,
Yeah.
good and bad going on at the same time. So you couldn't really, they were sort of connected. So there's just enough good to keep
Yeah.
you
Right.
like
Right.
just enough.
Yeah.
Just enough. Yeah.
Wow. That's like brainwashing
Hmm.
to the extreme.
Yes. Yes.
Very intelligent too.
Yep. Highly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Because there's just enough good to keep you believing in the system,
Yes. Yes.
to believe that there's some sort of like a, I don't know, greater good despite all the pain and that you
Ex-
guys went through, that it was for something bigger than yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Exactly. Something that's really well said.
Yeah.
And we're all inspired to be, go beyond ourselves and to
Yeah.
be that. So yeah, it feeds on that aspect of the
Yeah.
needs of the human.
When you finally decided to make that pull that trigger,
Yes.
how do you even make that happen? How do you make your escape plan?
So it was challenging because at that point in the history of the cult, he had our leader and his posse, I like to call them, had seized all of our financial, so our social security numbers. We as children, as soon as we reached the age of 18, we got credit cards out in our name that the cult would use.
Hmm.
Everything we purchased, our money was theirs. We had none of our own personal money. And so I had this moment where I walked in and things were getting out of the cult was spiraling out. Like the violence and the erratic and irrational behavior had sort of reached an all-time high. And so I walk in, I see my parents brutalized, and I make this conscious decision. Even if I'm going to hell, I'm in hell now, and I'm willing to risk hell. I'm willing to get out of the hell right now for the hell that might happen to me.
Mm,
But it took me almost 2 years from that moment to actually get to the point where I left physically. And there were a
mm,
few different things. I was still heavily indoctrinated. So I had to go through my own process of what is truthful, what is not, will I be possessed by the devil? What will happen to me? I then saw, based on what happened to my parents with my sister's experience, that just leaving would put my parents in great danger.
mm,
And I really had a beautiful love for the children there. And I had, despite everything, always, I felt they were my own children. I
mm,
feel like I've mothered many children. I cared for them from the moment they were born.
yeah.
I protected them. I always had a little bit more of balls than most people there. And I didn't just conform,
Mm,
even before I chose to leave. And so I was able to create some semblance of protection for a lot of the children. And I
mm,
also, on top of that, was able to give them love. So even sometimes I couldn't protect them fully, I could give them the love on the other side that they
right.
weren't receiving. So those two great pains of leaving my parents and the children kept me there longer. But
Mm,
eventually, what happened is, in order, I got to a point where I thought, okay, this is wrong. I don't want to be here, but I'm going to sacrifice myself to be here for those that I love because leaving will harm them.
mm,
So I disconnected completely from their belief system and from the means in which they controlled us, which was a lot of brainwashing, verbal brainwashing, and physical. So when they would say things to me or set rules, I went against them. When they
mm,
would try to come at me to force me into submission, I would literally, I remember one time they were screaming at me and hitting me, and I remember saying in my head, "You can do anything, you'll never get to me anymore. Like, hit
wow.
me, beat me, scream, curse me to hell. You, you're not getting to me. I'm different." And they could feel that energy shift. And
Right.
with that came a lack of fear of them. Without a lack of fear, I spoke out more. I confronted, I did not conform.
Mm,
And I began to create a problem there
mm,
because other people were taking notice. So they ultimately asked me to leave, but
mm,
they positioned it in such a way where they told me that they had gotten a message from God. And although we weren't supposed to be in the outside world, I was chosen to go out into the world. My mission suddenly became being in the world.
mm,
It was their last attempt to get me out. And so when they did that, I basically negotiated my terms and I said, I'm not going anywhere unless you will not touch my parents. I will come up I will travel no matter where I am and come and check on my parents every day. They're not to be touched as a result of my decision. And every child my age, 18 and older, must receive that same invitation to leave without the mind control brainwashing.
wow.
Or so I couldn't do anything about the kids
You
because they weren't
negotiated
human.
quite a big
I did.
deal.
Yes. So quite a few of my friends went back and forth. Some of them stayed. Some of
Yeah.
them came with me a few months later. Some of them there was a whole group of people that once I left and created that, it started a movement of people leaving, including my mother and my sister a year and a half later.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well done.
Thank
You're
you.
like the hero of the cult.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So what happened after you escaped the cult? Like I can't imagine for someone who like that was your life.
Yes.
This was your entire life, and then like you step outside of the matrix literally, and
Yeah.
then like you're in the real world, and like
Yes.
how do you find yourself, how do you assimilate yourself back into the society?
Yes. Well, for a long time, I just acted as if, and I was very street smart. I was born with kind of my experience at the cult was good because I had to constantly be gauging everyone's behavior to try to see who, if this person who was in power was going to get me in trouble. Or so I had this great, my entire survival was dependent on me being able to assess, observe, adjust my behavior accordingly.
Mm,
So that actually served me well in the world. I went out in the world and I knew I was weird and different. And so I just started, I mean, I watched every detail. I copied and mimicked. I watched what people wore, how they
yeah.
ordered off a menu. Like I literally was incredibly observant.
Mm,
And so I acted as if, and I also wanted, I was very embarrassed and shameful and I had a lot of pain from my past that I
mm,
had no ability, did not know how to handle.
yeah.
So I literally was like, I'm starting over right now. Today starts my new day, my life basically. And I'm going to acclimate as fast as possible,
Right.
and I didn't know better. So, two of my other friends ended up, they almost didn't, but at the last minute they came with me. So we had the three of us together.
Mm,
And so, I got a job working at a deli counter in a little store,
yeah.
and I was making minimum wage and, we were sharing rent in that place. So at least we could offset the cost of our living.
Yeah.
But I was making very little money, but I was free and I didn't know. To me, anything was possible for the first time in my life because when you
Mm,
grow up in an environment like that, you can't dream. There are no dreams.
I just
So,
can't imagine how fresh of the breath of fresh air that you felt,
yes,
like putting all the 25 years of being controlled,
yeah,
and being put in such a just controlling environment,
yeah,
and to finally get out to the real world and your own terms.
yes.
That I don't know how that felt like, but
Well, what's interesting, I had never really exercised the right to make a choice. So actually, besides the exhilaration of freedom, there was
mm,
terror. And making a choice, when you think about it, I was a trained dog there. I was I was trained to obey, to not question, and to just do. So all of a sudden, I was faced with choices, and I didn't know how to make choices for
mm,
myself. So a lot of that was terrifying for me.
yeah,
Um, but it was also exhilarating, and I felt in that moment, in that first few months, the world, anything was possible, and
yeah.
anything I ever desired, I was now in a space that things could materialize and happen. And that
Mm,
was a beautiful feeling. It didn't
yes.
last long, but it did have its time and it was
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. Why didn't it last long? It was overcompensated by the terror.
Well, and it also, I started to assimilate into society, and there's another set of rules and doctrines
Right.
and controls. And
Yes.
it's a larger collective cult.
Yeah, you thought you skipped the matrix, but it's not
Right.
a bigger
A
matrix.
bigger, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, and then I started to realize, wow, I'm minimum wage isn't going to get me that far,
Right.
the reality of life and what you need to exist. And then
Yeah.
I was, had a lot of shame and lack of self-love and insecurity, and I'm out interacting with people and I'm, you know, having bad experiences happen to me, and there's pain, there's real pain out here too, and I
Yeah.
don't have the tools.
Yeah.
So I was, and after the initial high, I was kind of thrown back, and then there's all this repressed pain and anger and rage that isn't being addressed, and I'm
Mm,
depressed, and
right.
I don't know who I am, and there's no purpose. And so I started to slowly go down into a very dark hole as
Wow.
well.
So what happens after you worked at the deli and
Yes. So I made, so again, I was really keeping myself, I acted as if a lot. So I was very detached from myself. And again, I had rejected everything I ever knew to be me. All my beliefs there I rejected. So that's really our identity is based on a
Mhm.
series, our truth, our beliefs, our
Yeah.
identity. It's who we are.
Yes.
So I immersed myself in the world and I thought all of the problems I have are simply because I'm weird and abnormal and I'm just not acclimated.
Mm,
So the faster I can assimilate and become normal and do all of the things that people out here are doing, all my problems will go away.
right. Wow.
And so I spent 10, 15 years. And again, I have anecdotes and stories and meet beautiful people. And, I remember my very first friend out of the cult who I told about my cult. I didn't speak. It's only recently in the last 4 or 5 years that I have even told a lot of people about my time in the cult. But I remember how gently she took me in and she saw me as a normal person despite that. And she encouraged me. And so she was one of my first, I call her angel. And in my book, I say I have three angels, and they're Charlie's angels: Cameron, Lucy Lou, and Rue. And then I
Yeah.
have a Charlie too that comes in. But these are angels that came in and carried me.
Yeah.
But I acted so for the next 10, 12 years. I just was about, I'm not normal enough. I need a better career. So I
Yeah.
really went into the matrix full throttle.
Yeah, and that is the narrative
Yeah.
that we were being told in this
Yes.
society
Yes.
that you gotta fit in, you gotta act normal to be accepted.
Yes.
And in order for you to feel that you're worthy is like when you fit into the society and to
Exactly.
get their approvals of
Yes.
like what is right and wrong, how you like show up in the world.
Definitely. And I had no love for myself. So
Mm,
all of my validation was
yes.
external, between the men that I dated to my career to everything was an external validation,
Yeah.
which is so frightening, to be how terrifying that our entire identity and self-worth is based on the reactions and responses of
Mm,
others and externals. So, but there was I never connected with myself. I
mm,
never went deep to address the trauma and pain that lay within. And I found myself living in New York City, a great career, financially secure, lots of friends, traveling the world, having a car, like partying, all these beautiful things that should fulfill me. And there was a gnawing, aching hole that was getting worse and worse and
mm,
worse. And I had a job in pharmaceutical sales. And so my job was to go out and socialize and be bubbly and befriend the doctors. And I would wake up, I could barely get out of bed. I could
uh,
barely face life. It was so empty and meaningless. And so there was so much pain and depression. And it drove me on a deep, deep journey. I did not have I knew I wouldn't kill myself, but living was an agony. And I
mm,
thought I have to find a way to survive, to live, because I'm in such pain that life itself was such an agony for me. So
mm,
that 4 or 5 years ago is what drove me to ultimately reconnect to that voice, to that knowing that I had silenced for so long in my
mm,
great effort to be part of the matrix.
yeah.
And I went back, and the first step of remembering and connecting with that voice was to go back and unpack all of that trauma that was deep, deep within, and
Mm,
to look at it and face it. And but not in a bad, I was terrified at first, but in the end it has turned out to be, because it's a journey I'm still working on,
yeah.
one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. It's not nearly as painful. I am no longer an abused little girl. So when I go back to access, I'm accessing it as a wise, intelligent, deep, compassionate,
Mm,
loving woman. So I can go back and I can go to that experience and I can hold that little child,
mm,
and she doesn't have to make those choices anymore. I can relieve her of that
yes.
incredible stress of
Yes.
having to perceive everything. And I can come with all my strength and my wisdom and my knowing. And so I'm
Yeah.
reprogramming my entire body and how I relate to what happened to me.
Mm,
And it's beautiful.
that's so beautiful.
Yes, yes,
I think that inner child in us is well, people think that we grow up and become an adult, but
yes,
that inner child stays within us, and
yes,
any unresolved traumas and
yes,
pain that we suppress is stored in our body.
yes,
And we live in a society where we were taught to distract ourselves and to run away from that pain, which I
yes,
think what you were experiencing
yes,
in New York through making money, through the friendship, shallow friendship that you made, and like
yes,
all the parties and
yes,
all the surface level type of materials that we think that will fulfill us,
yes,
but it didn't touch the core of our
yes,
pain, and that's
yeah,
why we always feel so devoid of
yes.
meaning.
And now I'm so grateful for the pain because it is what dragged me, is the pain that dragged me to my healing. And I've connected
Yeah.
to a joy. It's interesting. It's just recently that I've experienced joy.
Mm,
You don't think about it. I didn't have a childhood with joy, and I didn't know what the feeling of joy was.
yeah.
So if we don't know what something feels like, how can we manifest? How can we bring something in that we don't
Yeah.
know exists?
Yeah.
And so I'm very much now an advocate of individual truth. I believe that
Mm,
within each one of us, we do have this knowing, and that whether we're born in an abusive extreme cult like myself, or we're part of a collective cult, or a family cult, or religious, because anything that takes us out of ourself
mm,
and that tells us how we should be
yeah.
and does not support us connecting with our truth in
Yeah.
and of itself is a cult.
Yes.
And it takes us from our true vitality, our source of who we are. And when we think about it, no matter where we're born, like we're always told the most heroic, not the most heroic, but one of the best things to be is selfless, right?
Mm,
But actually, I believe there's a great error in that.
mhm,
It because selfless means you don't it's putting others before ourselves. And I believe in this term that I thought that I coined, but now I realize many people use it. So I probably didn't coin it, but I like it, which is self-full.
Selfful.
And it means being full of self. When I say full of self, I mean being plugged into the truth of who we truly
Mm,
are. And when we connect with our truth, we can go out and be to others and give to others from a place of complete power, knowing, and strength
yeah.
without a lack. Whereas if we put others first without serving ourselves, then we're not connected. We're ending up taking, not intentionally, but giving whatever. So actually, our power source is to be full of self first,
Yeah.
and we will be better serve others better
Yes.
in that space. So I'm a
Yes.
big advocate. I'm building a whole thing about that I want to share eventually.
Yes. Hell
Yes,
yes. Yes.
yes,
Coming from that place of like pure abundance, and
yes,
when you're so full,
yes.
then you can overflow with love instead of coming from that place of
Good.
lack.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we are connected with a divine energy that goes beyond the physical.
Mm,
There's no fear there. There's nothing but confident, like not arrogant confidence, but a
yeah.
knowing of who I am, what I have, what I can give, a love and compassion for all, for
Mm,
myself first. Everything that I was seeking externally, it sounds so trite, but was within me. And it
mm,
truly was. So
yes.
now that I've connected with this power source, I wake up to, I'm by no means happy every single day. I struggle with my demons, but when I do,
Yeah.
instead of seeking an external validation or suppress it, I go in and I'm like, okay, I've been here, but there's
Mm,
tools here, there's knowledge, there's wisdom. I'm going to reach inside and
yeah.
use those tools I've earned to deal with the challenge that I have today. So
Mm, that's such a beautiful message that I
thank you.
fully resonate with, because for the longest time I've always been trying to seek for something to fill me in
Yes.
externally,
Yes.
and then nothing will ever feel enough.
Right.
But then when I could connect to the heart
Yes.
and to within, and I realized all I've been searching for has always been here. So it's
Yes.
not so much of seeking for transformation or becoming someone else, but
Yes.
about coming home
Yes.
to who we already are, and we're all made of love.
Yes.
And that's the
Yes.
true source
Yes.
of joy and happiness and meaning in life.
Yes.
So thank you
It's
for.
been beautiful too because I've seen you on a like we haven't shared our entire journeys, but in the last year, and I can see it in you
Mhm.
as I see you connecting with yourself and loving
Mhm.
yourself, and it manifests just in you shine and you have this beauty and this warmth and compassion for others.
Uh,
So yeah,
Thank you.
yes,
Thank you for seeing it
yeah,
that way. That means a lot.
yeah,
It's a like you, it's still a journey,
yes,
something that I'm still learning
yes,
to practice every
yes,
single day, to not never forget despite what's going on the external and all the things that I was pursuing. Like the most important thing is connecting to ourselves
yes,
and to that source.
yeah.
I'm quite curious.
Mhm.
Like you state that you this healing journey started 4 to 5 years ago.
Yes.
How was that like?
So I have another beautiful angel, and I actually identify him as Charlie in my book as the man behind the other angels.
Yeah.
He was an older gentleman who I knew in my industry. He worked for a different company, but I used to run into him a lot, and there was something about him, a warmth, and I was always drawn to him.
Hmm.
And I had lost touch with him because we were in different territories in Manhattan working, and I ran into him, And I was so excited to see him because he had in my early days of that career had opened many doors for me because he was an old timer and he took a liking to me and like
Yeah.
father daughter liking, like sweet liking, and opened doors for me. And so I went running up to him. I hadn't seen him in 2 years, and we started talking. And he started sharing with me a journey that he had been on, and he had been using psychedelic medicine, and he'd been working with these clinical studies and trials with psychotherapists and trained professionals using, MDMA and
Mm.
psilocybin for deep trauma and
Mhm.
PTSD. And he started to just, before he even got into the actual medicine, he just started to explain to me the process of, the body carries the energetic memory of what happened to us. And whether we are conscious, if it's conscious or not, it's still operating and manifesting and controlling our lives. And so he started everything he was saying about that. I was like, wow, I've been so unhappy. And he's talking about past traumas. And I'm like, God, I have not addressed my past in over 15 years. And it was pretty brutal. And so gently, gently, he started to just share with me. And he had a community that he was working with who were very highly trained professionals conducting the clinical studies
Mm.
for the FDA. So this wasn't just random people in a jungle. This was really, these were like trained professionals.
Yeah.
And I was able to have the great, gift of going under some of their care. And they started to allow me a gentle way to go back into those memories that I had suppressed and forgotten.
Mhm.
And not only access them and allow my body to process that trapped energy that was manifesting in my body in rage and pain and depression,
Mm.
anxiety, but then be able to retell that story as well. And once I reconnected, so for instance, I felt joy for the first time here. And so once I felt joy, I could bring that sensation back out into my day-to-day life because
Yeah.
now I had an experience. And once I could see the understanding or relate to the woman that traumatized me as a child and see a greater even reason for her existence and what she went through, then I started to be able to apply this in my life at all times. And I became more and more aware.
Mm.
And I connected back to that voice. And now I have this beautiful relationship with my knowing. And we're married. We walk hand in hand. And I don't make too many decisions in my life without sitting down,
Mm.
breathing in, feeling my body. So
Yes.
I work very closely now. So when things come up and challenge me, or I do have decisions that I have to make, I go in and I say, okay, we're together now. This knowing has never let me down. It's never abused me. It's never abandoned me.
Yeah.
And so I work very closely with that. And in turn, gifts have been opening up for me, and I can see and I can share and hopefully I can hold others and gently understand them and support them on their own individual journey to find their individual
Mm.
truth. That's what I really want to do, is having been there
Yeah.
in such a dark space and come out and understanding what it can be like to not be in that space. I want to support anybody who wants to know that too, because it's so
Mm.
beautiful and so worth
Yes.
worth it. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think despite how dark and horrible your past and what you had to
Yeah.
go through, I think it's all meant for you to go through all of that so you could fulfill your mission and purpose to share this message, because
Yes.
a lot of people didn't get to fully. I think there's a difference between like knowledge and wisdom.
Mm.
For you to really embody that wisdom, you got to
Yes.
fully
Yeah.
experience all the things that you have to go through to fully resonate with this knowledge and this intelligence.
Yes.
And you had that gift.
Yes.
If it's a demon and it's a dark shadow, but like I could see it as a gift too. And I
Yeah.
think you're seeing it that way because that allows you then to impart this wisdom that
Yes.
not many people get to experience and embody in such a deep level,
Yes.
and allow everyone to fully step into their truth.
Absolutely. And you're so right. And you're so intuitive to connect with that. And I can honestly, truthfully say, I couldn't always say this, but I can honestly say today that I'm incredibly grateful for my past. I really don't
Mm.
have any regrets because I have recognized what I have. I would never have been able to embody such wisdom. You're
Mm.
absolutely right. Had I not gone there. And when you're in deep pain, you know who's been in deep pain. Like you
Yeah.
know when someone's been there and they haven't. So
Yes.
how beautiful to me that I have been where so I can go there and hold somebody and they know I've been.
Yes.
I think that's a beautiful gift that I
Yes.
have been there, and I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade it, really. I would not trade my life at all. I'm really authentically grateful and happy for all that I've experienced. That came recently. So it's not just a
Yes.
swarmy, like
Yeah.
it took me a long time, but now I truly embody. I'm so grateful for my
Yeah.
life. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, I have goosebumps all over because that was just so beautiful. I think, yeah, you'll be an angel that will walk a lot of people home because of what you've been through. So thank you
Yes, thank you.
for just stepping into your truth,
Thank you.
for being so courageous and brave to realize that there's beauty and unlimited beauty outside of your current reality
Yes,
and
yes,
pursuing it and developing this wisdom that you'll soon share
yeah,
and impart to a lot of many people
yeah,
that will soon, I believe, like you will walk a lot of people home.
yes, yes. Well, and thank you because your journey is so beautiful and creating these platforms and these ways to bring wisdom and stories forward, I think is a beautiful calling as well. So I really applaud you for not only your personal journey, but for creating this space. And I know you have the warm space as well. You're someone else who has taken his hardships or his feeling of lack and not only just gone there and faced it, but then how can you serve others and how can I create a space so that others don't have to go to the same extreme you can bring forward and create that. So I really applaud and respect you for your work as well. And
Thank you.
yes,
Thank
yes,
you. That means a lot.
yes.
Um, we're coming to an end,
Okay.
and I would love for you to share a lesson that our audience could learn from your journey.
Yeah.
We went through a lot of different things, but if
Yes.
there's like one really key takeaway that you want people to walk away with, what would that be?
I think to question. I think the act of questioning is what leads us back to ultimately connecting with our true knowing. So oftentimes we just sort of accept truths and beliefs from, culturally, family. And so that is what slowly over time, without us even knowing, kind of takes away our divinity, our sovereign right to discern. So I believe one of the first steps in regaining your truth and your identity is to start questioning,
Mm,
asking yourself questions. It could be, who am I? Or what does this believe? Or why do I believe this? Or do I believe this? And that very simple act of questioning, I
yeah.
think will start us on that journey home, as you said.
Yes. Yes.
And then ultimately honoring ourselves first. So I
Yeah.
have I have a little, do you want me to 2 seconds? Or I do believe also I have made a pledge to put myself first, to honor myself.
Mm,
And I wrote a small little pledge that people can say, and it's modeled after the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States, which is something we say to our flag.
yeah.
So I took basically the same thing, but I rewrote it. Instead of pledging my allegiance to an external body or governing body,
Mm,
I've taken it back and I pledge allegiance to myself. And I'll share it really fast.
please, yes.
I pledge allegiance to myself and the divinity that lies within, one knowing unto myself, indivisible in uniqueness, truth, and love.
Wow. Wow. That's the end of the podcast. Wow, that is,
Go home now.
yeah, thank you. That's powerful.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yes.
Thank you. And what I also took away from this conversation is that we're somehow guided by this higher intelligence
Yes.
that we have no understanding whatsoever, but
Yes.
there's always that something in us that is so divine and beautiful. And if we, like you said, just take the time to question and connect to that source,
Yes. Yes.
we will be guided
Yes.
to the place where we need to be. And all that pain that we had gone through in our lives,
Yeah.
it will serve a greater purpose.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Beautiful.
Yeah. And you're writing a book now,
Yes. Yeah.
and you're about to well, we talk, this is like, I guess, a little sneak peek
Okay.
of your book and
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
life
Please
story,
do. Yeah.
and you will, there'll be much more detail and wisdom and lessons in the book.
Yes.
And I can attest how beautiful of a writer Jaja is. I've seen a sneak peeks of the posts that you
Yes.
posted on Instagram. You just, it's just the way you articulate it. It's so poetic.
Thank you.
And I
Yes.
think you'll be able to bring people through a journey of full immersing them into your world that many people don't get to
Yeah.
experience. So where can people find out about the book, and if they want to connect with you, what would be the way?
Absolutely. So right now, the entire book project is under the umbrella My Truth dot My Story. So I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on YouTube, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Clubhouse. You can also reach out directly to me on any of those platforms by message, or my email directly is truth dot my story dot contact at Gmail. So basically, if you do my truth dot my story, that's kind of where you'll find all of my handles for everything. I'm sharing news about the book, updates on the book, as well as small little excerpts from the book.
Mm.
So you get a really nice, you get to kind of go along with this final journey with me. And I also sometimes share like what I'm going through or how I wrote a piece. And overall, the book, I'm writing it very simply,
Mm.
in very basic, simple terms so that anybody can really grasp it. You
Mm.
don't have to necessarily be on a deep spiritual journey.
Yeah.
If you're just longing or hurting or looking, I think the book can be a beautiful tool to help us all back home. So,
Beautiful.
yeah.
Can't wait for people to have their hands on this book and to
Thank you.
truly understand the life
Yeah.
journey and take away all the wisdom
Thank
that
you.
you've
Yes.
developed in your life.
Can't wait for it. I've been writing this.
Yeah, so make sure to put all the details in our podcast description. And again, Jaja, I just want to thank you so much again for being here and
Yes.
for sharing your story with us and just for existing. You're such a gift to this world. Thank you.
Thank you.